Thank you, Abigail. Thank you so much, Abigail. As mentioned by Abigail, my name is Isaac Kiwango. I'm the treasurer of African Evaluation Association, AFREA, and I'm happy to have joined you today for this presentation. It's about preparing the statement of work. As you can see the title there. This is about preparing the statement of work. And the agenda today is, we have about 5 items. Number one is, what is the statement of work in the first place? What is it? What does it include? Number 3, what needs to be observed or anything that needs to be watched out when you're preparing the statement of work? And also, do we really need a statement of work? And finally, we'll finish with the signing off or a checklist for approving the statement of work. So that is our agenda. And we'll start with the first item, which is basically, what is the statement of work? A statement of work essentially is a document that covers the working agreement between 2 parties. It's like, it can be a contract by itself, or it can be part of a contract. It's usually a statement that is providing agreement between the client or an agency or a contractor with the commissioning organization. It could be maybe you're a consultant or you're providing services. You're being given a job by an agency or a company or an institution or a government. And these things can cover evaluation. They can cover so many other things. So this is the document that you'll use to make sure that expectations are clear and agreed upon between the 2 parties. And you make sure that the one who is receiving the statement of work and the one who is issuing the statement of work are all reading the same page. You are all agreeing on what needs to be done. So it's a very important document in the sense that it's providing clarity. You know very well, in this kind of arrangement or in this kind of jobs, clarity is key. Clarity is so important for the 2 parties to agree what is it that one is required to be doing, or what is it that one is expecting from you. So in summary, that is the statement of work. We'll pause later on to see if there's anybody who has a question. So the next slide is about, what does the statement of work document includes? Basically, what I have tried to outline here, these are the key elements that should be included in the statement of work. However, the list could be longer or it could be shorter, depending on the nature of the agreement, depending on the nature of the assignment, depending on the nature of the project. The list could be longer, it could be customized, but all in all, at the end of the day, you basically need the following. You need the project description of the project. What is it that you're all engaged in? Number 2, you need to clearly set out whether you are the one receiving the statement of work or you are the one issuing the statement of work. In order to provide clarity, you need to clearly outline what are the milestones, what are the different stages of delivery that the consultant or the service provider is required to go through or to meet. And finally, the third item is individual tasks. The commissioning agent, that is the one who is issuing the statement of work, may decide to itemize or to list down the list of tasks that he or she expects the consultant to undertake. It's not necessary, but when it's included in the statement of work, it provides a lot of clarity. And this avoids future disagreement, future conflict, and misunderstanding between the 2 parties. Deliverables also needs to be included there. Payment information, expected outcomes, and type of reports required and how to manage the service provider. And finally, the terms and conditions and requirements that binds the two parties. And then we start now with each element. We'll try and expound or to explain in detail what each element contains and what does it mean. The first one we said is the project/assignment or task or objective. This is the problem statement. And this is a section or a section that describes clearly the history or the background of that project. Why is it that the external assistance is required? Why is the consultant being invited for this project? Where is the project coming from? What have been the challenges? Okay. Or in summary, it's the background, trying to explain why there's a need to have this external intervention. And this section also should be able to outline the specific requirement that the consultant or service provider should be able to provide. And these are supposed to be as clear and concise as it can possibly be. Because this is the first stage where agreement is being created between the two parties. The next item in this presentation, in that list of things that needs to go into the statement of work, are the milestones. These are the key punctuation points in the project or in the assignment that the consultant is supposed to deliver. And typically of an evaluation project, one will be required to produce an inception report. First of all, there could be an inception meeting if the client wishes so. So you'll be required, probably as a consultant, you'll be invited to make a presentation to show your understanding of the terms of reference, explain to the client the interpretation. How do you understand the terms of reference? How are you going to embark on the assignment? How are you going to do the job? What will be your methodology? What will be your approach? The timeline that you propose for completing the assignment, the team that you're going to field in, all this will be required to be presented during the inception meeting. And then thereafter, you may be required to document all that in a document that is called an inception report. And then also you may be required to provide a midterm report. Along the way, the commissioning agent or the client may decide and say, okay, fine, we need a midterm report. This is just to check how far are you going on? How far are you doing? What have you achieved? Because you don't want, as a client, the client doesn't want surprises at the end of the project. So this is a mechanism to check in between, how far are you going? What are the challenges that we've been experiencing? On the part of the consultant, this is a great opportunity because let's say you've been experiencing the problem of data collection. You are getting problems collecting data or you're not getting the right data. This is an opportunity for you to explain that, to make sure that the client is aware of the challenges and problems that you're getting. Or maybe you're not getting cooperation from the stakeholders or any agency or any person who is supposed to be assisting you in the project. So this is your opportunity as a consultant to explain to the client, these are the challenges that I'm facing, so that there's no surprise at the end of the assignment. And finally, of course, once you've done everything, you've collected your data, you've done your analysis, you've consulted the key stakeholders, you produce the final report. So these are the key milestones. There could be others, depending on the nature of the assignment, depending on the nature of the project. The client may decide to increase the list, the items that constitute a milestone. But these are typical ones. The next item in the statement of work is the individual tasks. What exactly needs to get done in order to go from where you are to a finished project? The slide is telling us that sometimes the commissioning agent may decide to keep quiet on this. Some commissioning agents or clients may decide to keep quiet on this. However, this approach may sometimes lead to problems, especially when the consultant or service provider makes an inadvertent errors in the interpretation of the terms of reference. There could be situations where the consultant has wrongly interpreted the terms of reference. And it is at this stage where it is very critical for the consultant to be very clear and concise. And if there's anything that is not clear, you need to clarify with the client. For instance, the use of some of the English words like review, evaluate, examine, assess, they can all mean different things to a consultant or to an individual. So, or they could come along with different interpretation. So you need to clarify with the client. When you say review, what does it mean? When you say evaluate, what do you mean? When you say make an assessment, what does it mean? So you make sure that at this particular stage, all the individual tasks that have been listed there are clearly understood. If you are not clear with any of those terminologies, please make sure that you go back to the client and you make sure that all these individual tasks are clearly explained by the client, or you have or both of you, both the two parties, you have a common understanding, or the meaning of a particular terminology is clearly understood, or a particular task is clearly understood between the two parties. These are areas that, if ignored, later on down the line, they create a lot of problems, misunderstanding, and conflicts. You end up not agreeing on what are the deliverables, and then complaints, and finally maybe the contract is terminated, and you have that kind of situation. And it's not a good way to end up as a consultant or as an evaluator. It's not a good way to end up with your client. So it's very important to make sure that all these individual tasks that have been listed in the statement of work are clearly understood. If you're not clear, go back to the client and seek clarification. Ask what does a particular task mean? Otherwise, then you'll not be able to score. We say the goalposts will be shifting. You think you're doing the right thing, only to realize that the client is saying, no, this is not what I meant. So that is very, very important. Another item in the statement of work is the deliverables. This basically explains what does the client need to see at the end of the project. What are the takeaways of the project? What is it that the client is buying? What is it that the client is paying the money for? Okay? All these are pertinent questions that I believe to guide your frame of mind in terms of what are the final outcomes of the project. These are, you can also call them key milestones or yardsticks to measure the achievement of the assignment of the project. Okay? They can also be used to define the scope of the assignment, or in other words, the boundaries of the assignment. We have mentioned earlier that you can have things like the inception report, midterm report, final report, or data collection report. All these are deliverables. And in many cases, these are tied up to the payment schedule. So it's important for you to make sure that you understand this, because they punctuate the project. They tell you at which stage of the project or of the evaluation process or of the assignment, where are you in the timeline. And then you have payment information. This is important for both the commissioning agent or the client and the consultant as well, or an evaluator. How much is the project going to cost, and how are you going to pay the team you're working with? This section is supposed to provide clarity in terms of the financial relationship. What is it that the service provider or the consultant should expect from the client in terms of remuneration? And how is it going to be scheduled? What are the terms and conditions? Is the payment to be attached or pegged to deliverable? These are very critical issues in the statement of work. Any ambiguity or lack of clarity on this section may possibly lead to conflicts and misunderstanding as the assignment is progressing. we all know that these services have to be paid for. As an evaluation consultant, your costs have to be compensated. So this is a critical section because you need to know, first of all, during the contract negotiation, you'll definitely have come to an agreement as to how much the whole assignment is going to cost. And these will be broken down into either they will be pegged or attached to different deliverables or milestones of the project, or it could be a lump sum, or it could be one at the beginning of the project at the time of signing the contract and one at the end of the completion. So all these things needs to be clearly spelled out. You need to be very, very pristine clear that what is paid when and how. This is what we call the terms and conditions. They need to be clearly spelled out. If this section is not clear, it may end up into problems because you may be working on a certain deliverable, but that deliverable does not attract payment, does not trigger payment. So it needs to be agreed at the very beginning of the project. Immediately when you embark on an assignment, you need to be very clear how is the payment schedule spread out. In what currency? How are you going to be paid? Is it going to be paid within the contract period, or even if the contract has expired, you can still be paid? All these things need to be sorted out. Different clients have different financial policies. So you need to be very clear with the culture, with the financial policy of the client or the agency that you're dealing with. Otherwise, it's an area that can lead to serious misunderstandings. Then you have expected outcomes. This section provides answers to the bigger problem or the bigger picture as to why the assignment or the task was being carried out. It will be an answer to the problem statement. Like, are we looking for a solution to a water problem, reducing malnutrition, child mortality, increasing production? This section also goes further to measure these outcomes that could be measured by way of indicators, physical delivery, or all workable recommendations. So if in this statement of work, you as an evaluation consultant are required to deliver on some of the expected outcomes, you need to be very clear, because as you reach the level of outcome, it becomes very complex and not very direct. So if your performance is being measured in terms of outcomes, then you need to be aware of that, because the measurement science, when it comes to outcomes, is not very discrete and very straightforward. So you need to agree. If you're being paid based on the indicator, then you need to know clearly how are you going to measure that indicator. Because then, if it's not clear, your payment may delay, and the completion of the project may delay because of that misunderstanding. So a lot of clarity is required at this stage. Then you have type of reports required and how to manage the service provider. Because you are delivering on a certain project, as an evaluation consultant, you need also to be managed by your client or the commissioning agent. And you can be managed in terms of reporting. So there has to be a reporting relationship. Who should report to who? Okay. There are situations where the consultant is made up of a team, and each team member is performing a particular task or assignment. Okay. This will require to clearly streamline or outline which individual reports, who reports to who, in other ways. And in this situation, there could be so many problems. Potentially, you may end up in a situation of multiplicity of reporting, duplication, and team members stepping on each other's toe. So it's especially when the project is big, it's complex, it has a wide coverage. It's very, very important to know exactly who is reporting to who. The evaluation consultant may have also different layers. Maybe there could be data collectors. Maybe you have data processors. then you have the field managers, then maybe you have the director. So it needs to know if the problem is at the level of data collection, where do these data collection individuals report to? Do they report directly to the client, or they report to their superiors, the field data collection field supervisor? How do you escalate problems if there are problems? Okay. And at the end of the day, the client will manage you through these different types of reports. As I mentioned earlier, there's something like the inception report, or progress report, or fieldwork report, or synthesis report, or data collection phase report. This all will depend on the nature of the project and how the client wants to manage you. There could be other types of reports, but these are some of the typical reports that may be required by the client. Terms and conditions is very important. To clearly outline some of these, to define or to outline the terms and conditions and other requirements if necessary, because not everything can be covered by the statement of work. So it's necessary to provide for these caveats. Okay, sometimes we call them the fine prints or the small prints, so that if there's anything that is not covered in the main document, then definitions is provided in the terms and conditions. It is necessary for the statement of work document to clearly define each and every terminology that has been used in the document. Define the terms you're using and any condition or requirement that aren't already made clear. And this is necessary to avoid misinterpretation, ambiguity, or any other issue that may lead to clarity and potentially create an environment for misunderstanding, conflicts, wrong inferences, and poor execution of the project. So at the end of the day, this is all about providing clarity and making sure that the two parties are reading from the same page. What needs to be done to be observed, or things to watch out? Number one is clarity of partners or confusing contract and contract client. You need to know sometimes some of these development projects, they have different stakeholders. So as an evaluation consultant, you need to know clearly whom are you reporting to? Who is your client? There could be so many people involved. There could be the government. It could be an NGO that is acting between the government and the donor agency. Then you have the donor agency itself. You have the beneficiaries. So you need to know clearly who. You need to conduct a stakeholder analysis to know exactly who is your client, who is the beneficiary. It's very important so that you know their roles and you know how to manage the expectation. Inadequate preparation. You need to be fully prepared. Okay, when you're going for a meeting, making sure that you understand all the endpoints of each meeting during negotiation and preliminary meetings before the award. So you really need to pay attention. Don't take it easy, take it seriously, making sure that you understand the agenda, you prepare for each item in the agenda. Also leaving things vague, either in terms of objectives, resourcing, possible outcomes, or other expectations. Vague contracts are rarely discovered intervention or even evaluation phases, and invariably leads to disillusionment during these later phases. Also, financial relationship needs to be clearly, you need to know exactly who is paying you and how and when. And also failure to different types of psychological contracts. This is important because sometimes you need to manage the expectation of the client. Although you can have statement of work, but you can still have what we call a scope creep. Somebody is expecting you to raise over and above the terms of reference. So you need to understand these psychological contracts and how to manage them. Basically, the expectations. Otherwise, you may find that you're not really hitting the goalpost because the client keep on shifting depending on his expectation. So the goalpost is shifting. You're doing this, you're being told, no, this is not good enough. You need to do more. So you need to be careful with some of these, what we call psychological contracts. And basically, at the end of the day, making sure that both parties understand each other and you know exactly what are they expecting and what are you delivering and whether you have the capability to deliver. Do we really need a statement of work? It's very clear that the statement of work will save you a lot in future. It's about managing expectations. Just like any other agreement, it's always good to, if those making agreement know exactly what they're agreeing to. Okay? As a commissioner, it's in your advantage to have something that enables you to say, but this is what we agreed. Okay? And failure not to have this document may lead into confusion and conflicts because there are different expectations. And if these expectations are not synchronized, then you're creating a fertile ground for misunderstanding and conflicts. Checklist for approving the statement of work. Ask yourself, have different stakeholders been consulted in the process of writing the statement of work? Does your statement of work have all the suggested content in adequate format? Have you included priority issues and questions in the evaluation matrix? Has your colleagues read the SOW to review the consistency, completeness, and clarity of the information it presents? Has it been approved by your superior? These are key practical steps to be taken before you issue out or you sign off a statement of work. Because remember, it's a commitment between the two parties, and you, on behalf of your organization, you're committing your organization. So make sure that all these checkpoints have been taken into consideration and the document is valid and it represents your institution and your capabilities. I've seen some questions in the chat.
So, Isaac, thank you very much for the presentation. Now we don't have any questions yet, but I'll give the participants the opportunity to ask questions now. A question from Reggie Quackers, which says, if there be a change in context, what is the room for reviewing a statement of work after contract has been signed?
Yes, that's a very good question. You have to remember that the statement of work is part of the contract. It's a key section. It's a supporting document in the contract. And this document is not casted under iron and steel. Circumstances of the project may change. If circumstances of the project change, then the two parties need to sit down and agree. How do we accommodate this variation? So in the contract document, there should be a clause that says that in the event that the scope of the work has changed, there should be room for negotiation. You can omit this section, but then should circumstances change, and then it will be very difficult for you to go back to the negotiating table unless you treat that variation as a separate piece of work and then you sign a new contract. So both ways is okay, but the key thing is as a consultant and as an evaluation consultant, you need to be very, very careful with the scope of work. There's what we call the scope creep. That means the client is expecting you, the scope of work is increasing slowly and gradually without you noticing. Finally, you end up doing what you are not contracted for. So you need to be careful, and immediately when you realize that, bring it to the attention of your client. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. I want to ask, at what stage does one have to take note of change control board? If it is important for it to be observed whilst preparing the scope of work, or it's a whole different aspect that will have to be handled in executing an evaluation contract.
Charles is asking, what is the main difference between synthesis reports and inception reports? And we have George Owusu asking, okay, Musa just has typed out his question. George Owusu asking, what you are describing looks like TOR. How different is TOR from scope of work? Is the statement of work the same as the scope of work?
Yes, this is an issue of terminologies. They could mean the same because in the TOR also there's a section describing the scope of work. Also, you can have you can have the document called as the statement of work, and inside the statement of work you can describe the scope of the work. So they at the end of the day they all mean the same thing. It depends on how the format of the document, how you want to format, how you want to present it, depending on the nature of the assignment. And also, Jojo Osu is asking what you're describing looks like TOR. How different is it from this SOR? It could mean one and the same thing. It's a matter of terminology. You can call it terms of reference. You can call it statement of work. Mostly, statement of work is a terminology comes from the Americans. That in the English world, they mostly call it terms of reference. Another question was, when do you notice the change of scope? The change of scope, you all the time as an evaluation consultant, you need to be vigilant. You need to be vigilant. You need all the time to make reference to your statement, to your statement of work or your terms of reference. The client will want your arm and leg, all, even your head, all the time for the same amount of fees. So you need to be careful. So you need to be vigilant. You need to monitor. You have to have your eyes and ears on the ground, making sure that what you are doing conforms to the terms of reference. Otherwise, you'll end up in a scope creep. What is demanded from you is too much, is too big, is way big, way out of what you agreed at the initial stage. So all the time, you need to be careful with the scope of work. Was there another question?
So we have Collins Abrahams asking, can you share with me a sample, being that I have never done any consultancy and I would like to venture into this field? And then we have a question from Renji Kwakas. Renji Kwakas says, kindly build a sequencing relationship between scope of work. Okay, you already did that. With a bridge in contract by either party, will the SOW be admissibly as a legal binding document?
Okay.
And the first question was, can you share with me an example?
Okay. Yes, an example can be provided. I'll give it to Abigail, and Abigail has got your email. So Abigail can share with you the sample TOR or scope of work. That is very possible, not a problem at all. But I'll remove the specific names of the client and the organization involved. So you can have it. That one is not an issue. You can get it. And then another question was, in the event there's a breach of contract, is the statement of work or the TOR a binding document? The answer is yes, because in the contract there should be a clause that will state that every attachment to that contract forms part of the contract. So everything must be interpreted in a holistic manner. That's why it's very important for you, and it was mentioned in the preparation, that when you're going out for the signing, make sure that you read each and everything and you understand. Don't sign a document. Don't sign anything that you don't understand. So make sure that the contract and all its attachment, which includes the statement of work or the TOR, the terms of reference, are in line, are in sync, are in synchronization, and they make sense because they form part of the contract. I hope I've answered your question.
In the scope of work, in writing your scope of work, is it important to include the change control board, as in the people constituting the members that can approve a change in the scope of work? And if there's going to be a change in the scope of work, the procedures that one must follow to to initiate that change of work? Must the scope capture that, or the change control board is a different document or a different aspect altogether?
Okay, that's a good question. The statement of work being part of the contract assumes that the two parties that are signing the contract are legally competent to do so. Or in other words, it's only a legal entity that can sign a contract. So an individual of sound mind and of the right age is a legal entity. So you can either sign a contract as an individual. Can you mute your microphone, please? So you can sign as an individual, or you can also sign as an institution representing your institution. So whoever has been entrusted by his institution to sign the contract is legally competent to change the contract. If there are circumstances where you as an evaluation consultant thinks that maybe the person who is going to sign the contract on behalf of his institution is in a situation where, or is in a circumstance where you doubt whether this person is the right person to sign the document or to change the contract, then you may ask for the power of attorney. You may require that the person who is going to sign that contract on behalf of institution has enough legal mandate to sign that document. And he can prove that by providing the power of attorney. Power of attorney is a document that the said organization empowers that individual to sign on its behalf. So that provides you comfort that you are entering into an agreement with the right person. Whoever you are is signing the document on behalf of his institution has the legal mandate to do so. So that way he can amend the contract. If there's any limitation that the organization wants to impose upon that individual, it will be stated in the power of attorney that the person representing organization A can do the following. He can sign 1, 2, 3, 4. He can amend 1, 2, 3, or he cannot amend 1, 2, 3, 4. But he can sign. He has the power to amend or not to amend 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever items as outlined in the contract.
My question was mostly pertaining to the fact that the sign-off has been done. In the course of executing the evaluation, perhaps a deliverable has been changed, or a definition of a deliverable has been changed. Now, there's work has to go through a different rewriting, right? If that is to be done, must the individual parties that will supervise that change of work or approve the change of work be included in the scope of work at the initial stage, or it is a different aspect of the whole project?
I hope I've been able to follow what your question. It's like you're saying there's a change in the deliverable, and then you're asking like the people who authorized the change of deliverable, should they have been included in the initial contract agreement? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, partially. What I'm saying is that before the project is being signed off,
yes,
in the scope of work, must it be included that if eventualities that there is a need for a change in the scope that has to be executed? Yes. The procedures that must be followed to execute that change in order for the project to continue, must it be included in the scope of work whilst drafting it, or it is a different document altogether?
Both. It can be it can be the same document that will outline that in the event of changing the scope of work or changing or amending a particular clause in that agreement, it will state clearly how a good contract will state clearly how the change of contract will be executed. And how do you notify each other that there's a change? I want to change a particular clause. Is it by telephone? Is it by a physical meeting? Is it by a postal delivery? It will clearly say that. It's good to do that, especially if the project is big and complex. And then once that has been what has been outlined, it's important to follow that. And subsequently, if somebody else has to supervise the deliverables, then the contract should state that apart from this, maybe the chief of party of a particular organization, the contract should state that the chief of party or anybody entrusted by the chief of party, okay, has the power to supervise whether the deliverables have been met or not. So a good contract, and especially if the contract is big, complex, has so many stakeholders, it's good to outline all those minute details. Otherwise, you'll end up into those misunderstandings. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a question from Billy. Billy says, my experience with clients is that they do not adhere to timelines. Usually certain funds unavailability. How does one respond to that, given that one has committed in a lot?
Come again, Abigail.
So Billy's asking, my experience with clients is that they do not adhere to timelines.
Yes.
Usually certain funds unavailability. How does one respond to that, given that one has committed a lot in it? I think he's asking for in cases where you don't have there's a delay in funding, the funds to start the project with. What do you do?
Okay, so it depends. If you are an evaluation consultant, this is personal. It doesn't represent my official position as a Freya treasurer. My personal position as a consultant, I'll tell you that don't get into such a contract. Because remember in my presentation, I said all clauses in the statement of work or terms of reference should not be vague. So if you go into an agreement which says that your payment is subject to availability of funds, that is a vague clause. And remember, you as an evaluation consultant, you're not covered by any other law except your contract. It's different from an employee. If an employee is entering into such a contract, he's covered by so many other legal provisions, okay, according to International Labour Organization. So he's protected. But as a service provider, as a consultant, you are bounded by your agreement. If you enter into a contract which says that your payment will be subject to availability of funds, so if there are no funds, that means you don't have any fallback position. That is a very vague clause, and personally, I won't advise you to get into a contract which is of that nature. I hope I've answered your question.
In the absence of any questions, I think we can bring the webinar to a close. Isaac, I want to say a very big thank you for finding time to make this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you all participants for making the time to join us. We are grateful. Thank you. And
thank you, Abigail.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.